for everyone who's joined us. We're just going to wait a few more seconds here for everyone to log in. Guess we should have had some elevator music, hey, Andrea?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we may as well get started. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our June Green Living Workshop. My name's Ginny Toffelmeyer, and I'm an Environment and Sustainability Specialist here with the town of Okotoks. So I first would like to acknowledge that the land that we are gathering on today, though virtually, is the traditional territory of the people of Treaty 7 in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising of Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, and the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. So we have an exciting night ahead of us. We're going to learn all about getting more free water for our yards through rainwater harvesting. Our presenter tonight is ANDREA ROCCHIO from Water Harvesting Canada. So ANDREA has been involved in rainwater harvesting since 2012 and has been educating the public all about it ever since. I've been in one of her presentations before and it's very lovely. I enjoyed it a lot, learned so much. So just a quick reminder that everyone who attends tonight will be entered to win a rain barrel, which I think is an awesome door prize. We will be taking questions throughout the presentation, approximately after each slide, and if time allows, at the end of the presentation. So if you'd like to ask a question, you can click on the Q&A option on your screen and type in any question that you have throughout the presentation. So we're going to do our best to get to all of them tonight. If we cannot get to your question, we will answer it via email, so you won't be left out or anything. Now, before Andrea gets started on her presentation, we're going to do a quick poll to find out your experience with rainwater harvesting. So the question is, what size of rainwater capturing system do you currently have on your property? So the poll should have popped up on your screen. Please go ahead and answer, and I'll let you all know the results in just a minute.
Can I answer too?
Oh, there was an option for that, and I didn't click on it. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I'll tell people about mine.
Okay. Just waiting for a few more people. Oh, okay, here we go. So, it's as I predicted, Andrea. So we've got 4 people that they don't have one. That's why they're here. They're here to learn from you. We have 4 people that have a rain barrel or 2. Ooh, and we have 1 person who has a very large rain capturing system for over 1,000 liters of water. So that's pretty cool. We've got a really diverse group here. All right.
Excellent.
Very cool. So, Andrea, thank you so much for joining us tonight. So please go ahead and tell us all about how we can harvest free rainwater.
All right, I'm just going to close your poll here. Can I go ahead and do that?
Yeah.
And do that because I can't get to my presentation.
Oh, no.
All right. So as Ginny mentioned, my name is ANDREA ROCCHIO, and I got interested in rainwater harvesting back in 2012 when I was taking my permaculture design course, because so much of permaculture is about managing water. There's a saying in permaculture, you plant your water before you really even start anything on your property. So it's it's foundational for so many things, and that's when I initially got interested in it. And then I worked actually with Green Calgary delivering the Green Communities Canada rain program. And that involved actually going around to homes, over 100 homes are in the Calgary area, and analyzing, downspouts and water flow on property and giving people some tips on things they could do to improve that and, how they could get into rainwater harvesting. And later in the presentation, we have some of their pearls of wisdom that I shared with everybody about managing water on your property. So I started my business in 2014 and really have focused mostly on the educational aspect of it. I worked with CANARM, the Canadian Association for Rainwater Management, for a number of years, and also the US organization. So yeah, that's kind of a bit of history of when I got into rainwater harvesting. The picture that's on that slide, actually, I went down and studied with Brad Lancaster at Watershed Management Group, and we did an installation in that workshop. So we'll talk more about Brad Lancaster later. Amazing resource for rainwater harvesting. All right, oh, come on, there we go. A little bit of a delay here. So now I've actually moved from my residential property in Calgary, and we now own a 15-acre parcel of land northeast of Calgary. And these are the tanks that I have now in the picture. Each one of these are about 4,300 liters. And with all the rain we've had, they've been full for quite a long time. So they've been full for several weeks now. So that's, but yeah, we're out here, we're raising chickens and microgreens and growing a garden, and we have laying hens. So yeah, full on to the farming bit, and, you know, really putting my rainwater harvesting experience to use. All right, so for tonight, we're going to talk about generally just about water in the environment, some things around that, making most of the rainwater, because we apparently are going to get lots of it in June. Then we'll get into talking about the different types of rainwater harvesting, passive and active rainwater harvesting, and then we'll also look at a residential lot in Calgary, and I'll show you how to calculate the amount of rainwater you'll be able to harvest, and then give you some ideas about how to design your rainwater harvesting system for your residential lot. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how much water there is of the water that's on Earth, how much of it is fresh water. And actually, it's a surprisingly small percentage. Only about 2.5% of that water that's available is in the form of fresh water. And as you can see from the graphic, a small portion of that is actually available to us, you know, in surface water, and a good chunk in groundwater, but then lots and lots of it's locked up in glaciers and ice caps. So looking at that really small percentage of overall water that's available, it becomes really, really obvious how important it is to manage that water really well. And water scarcity is one of the things that lots of governmental organizations have identified as an upcoming issue. So anything we can do to manage the water that falls out of the sky better, it's better off for everybody. So just briefly, the hydrological cycle, the water, all the water that's in our atmosphere is all there ever was, and it just keeps flowing continuously through this cycle. It evaporates from the land and from water bodies up into clouds, forms clouds, which eventually precipitates, and then falls back down to the ground, is either soaked into the ground, gathers in water bodies, and that process just, you know, keeps going over and over again. And that's a natural cycle, and that's the way it should be. Now, when it's working properly, the hydrological cycle, like 40% will evapotranspirate, which is evaporate from the leaves and foliage on the earth, and only 10% of the water will run off, while the rest of it will basically be infiltrated. That's in a natural environment, you know, trees, forest, grass, and that's the way we want things to work, because the water soaks in right where it falls and it replenishes aquifers right where they are, and that's a really good thing. However, most of our cities have been so paved over that natural cycle isn't allowed to happen anymore. And I'm not sure how Okotoks did in that big rainstorm a little while ago, but I know Calgary got absolutely flooded. And a lot of that is to do with the fact that there's nowhere for that water to go anymore. There's no natural areas for it actually to seep into the ground. So that results in, you know, well over half of the water running off rather than soaking into the ground where it is. And that causes any number of issues. So I guess I could stop for questions there quickly.
We don't have any questions so far, so you can go
Okay,
ahead.
there we go. All right. So, of great reasons to use the rainwater, and it's free is probably the really big one. The Once you've invested in your tanks and the infrastructure that you need to get the water in the tank, that's, of course, there is some cost to that, but your refills are free after that. And it's better for your plants because rainwater is free of salts, minerals, and chemicals that are generally found in municipal water and groundwater as well. So it's just really soft water that plants really love. The other thing is, as I mentioned, with the paved over cities, the stormwater runoff that happens in those cities, it picks up pollutants, and garbage and pet feces and cigarette butts and anything that's on the pavement all gets washed away into the rivers when those storms come. So any of that water that you can keep on your property and infiltrate right into your landscape, then that water basically doesn't contribute to those issues and the accumulation of water that happens when all that water comes down so quickly. And reducing your carbon footprint is an interesting one because they've done analysis of the amount of money that it costs municipalities to actually transport that fresh water to your house. Well, clean it all up first because they take it out of places like the Bow River and clean it up, get it to your house, and then to take away the black water, your sewage water, can be up to 20% of municipal budgets. So there's, the more that we can provide for our own water needs on our own property, the less money you have to spend, but also the less money the municipalities have to spend on moving that water around. And there's also really aging infrastructure in many of these cities that's going to cost numbers with a lot of zeros on them to fix. And if we can reduce our pressure on the system by taking care of our own needs in this way, then we can help our cities reduce the amount of money they have to spend on this. So conserving water is kind of the first thing we do. It's like recycling. What's the first thing you do? You reduce. Anything that you don't need to use, you don't. And so anything we can do to actually conserve the amount of water that we use just makes the system more robust. And one important component of that conserving water is soil health. The healthier the soil is, the more water it will absorb and retain. And for every organic matter, an acre, now I'm sure not all of you have an acre, but if you had an acre, you'd retain 25,000 gallons more water just with a 1% increase in organic matter. So anything you can do to keep this soil food web that's pictured here in this slide really healthy and alive, and that will absolutely have, more water will infiltrate with the healthier your soil is. And there's some easy things to do. Adding compost, of course, is a great way to improve your soil. Worm castings is another great way to add nutrient into your soil. And anything you can do to not till up your soil, like rototillers break up all the mycelium that's in the soil, all the structure. So anything you can do to do no-till will also help increase your soil health. And also the selection of plants is super important. The more deep-rooted your plants, they have access to deeper the soil depths where they can bring up more nutrients and more water from down below. So, the selection of plants within your landscape is an important thing to do to reduce the amount of water you would require as well. All right, so now we're going to get into active versus passive rainwater harvesting, and I'll just stop for a second and see if there was any questions so far.
No questions yet. Keep on going.
All right, okay. All right, so this is Brad Lancaster, and he does a demonstration that is just brilliant. I absolutely love this demonstration, and I'm just going to let him, I'm just going to play the video.
So it doesn't seem to be playing on our end.
Oh,
I want to show you a simple sponge model, which points out the importance of having a watershed that acts more like a sponge than pavement. Okay, so let's look at a little house here. This is a 1,000 square foot house, and I want you to see what happens when we rain on it. So here comes the rain, and what happens? The water is out of here. Stops raining, and where's the water? It's gone. Okay, so we had this free, high quality water falling from the sky, the highest quality water we have, and we just got rid of it, creating the need to import water at great costs from elsewhere, and thus destroying ecosystems elsewhere. But we could instead enhance our ecosystem as we enhance ecosystems elsewhere by using our local on-site resources rather than depleting them and creating this perceived need to import water from elsewhere. So maybe someone gets the idea that that is possible when they see that water flow off and they think, I want to harvest rainwater. Oftentimes people think tanks. So here are some substantial tanks. This is a 1,700 gallon tank, another 1,700 gallon tank. This is all to scale in relationship to the house. On this, and what happens? Woo! Tanks are full! Oh, but there's still water leaving the site. Okay? Oh, all right. So it stopped raining. And what happens? Well, we've got 1,700 gallons of water here, and we've got another 1,700 gallons here for 3,400 gallons. So that's water that we otherwise would have lost. But I don't know if you noticed, the cool thing here is compared to the previous scenario, we lost a lot of water, but not as quickly. It took a little bit longer for that water to run off site because we caught that 3,400 gallons in the tanks that otherwise would have been lost. That's awesome. But we still lost a substantial amount of water after those tanks filled. So we forgot the largest and least expensive storage, our soil. What we need is the sponge. So let's get a couple sponges, okay? Now, in your landscape, these sponges could be sunken, mulched, vegetated rain gardens, water harvesting earthworks, bioswales, porous pavement, and so on. So with that in place, with these strategies that absorb the rain rather than running it off, let's see what happens when it rains. Tanks are full. Okay, we're getting a huge biblical rain. Okay, and woohoo. Okay. All right, now I don't know if you guys saw the difference here, but compared to the previous scenario, we still lost water. Okay, we're always going to lose water because there's going to be rain events that exceed the capacity of our system. And of course we had rain hitting the unsponged side, so that was lost. But what hit the sponge was largely absorbed. So let's see how much water we caught. I'm going to remove the house, put in this little measuring cup, and let's see what we got. So 1,700 gallon capacity from this tank. Nice! Another 1,700 gallon capacity from this tank. Sweet! We got 3,400 gallons of water that otherwise we would have lost. High quality local water. You like local food? Well, try local water. Okay, you can see where my pinky is. That's how much water we got from the tanks. But now let's look at the sponge, okay? The earth and catchments. So I take this sponge. Oh, yeah. Nice. Look at all that water. And that's only one sponge. What about the other half? Sweet! Oh my God. It's abundance, baby. Shake those buns. So look at how much water we got there. Before it was down here where my pinky is. Now it's way up here. So we got over 10 times as much water caught in the sponge than we did in the tanks. So what's the take-home message? Tanks are a fantastic strategy to have water readily at hand for whatever you want. But don't overlook the soil. The soil is our largest and least expensive tank. We just need to set up the surface to allow that water in, so concave, not convex, and then the sponge of mulch and vegetation. And then once it's in the soil, how do we get it back out? Well, we can plant pumps. So that vegetation draws the water up from its roots and into the canopy so we can enjoy the water in the form of shade, food, wildlife habitat, erosion control, and so on. And of course, these same earthworks will also feed our creeks, our rivers, our springs, and our wells. This is the way we can put more water into the watershed than we extract, thereby enhancing the ecosystem over time.
I absolutely love that presentation. Brad's been doing that for a long time, and I just find it gives you such just a real easy demonstration of the capacity of your soil to infiltrate and hold water for you. So, you know, maybe you can't afford $1,000 tank, but you could do some work in your yard that would allow you to capture some of that water. So that's so Brad Lancaster, he's from Tucson. He's written these books, Rainwater Harvesting for the Drylands and Beyond. He's actually written two. So if you really want to dive deep into earthworks and how to do this stuff on your property, these are your manuals. They're very, very comprehensive. And this is his place in Tucson, and the picture in the upper left was where they started. It basically was just a dry dirt gravel pathway. And when I did go down to Tucson in 2012, I believe it was, and yeah, the streets all look like that in Tucson, and the rainwater was just basically trenched to run off into the road, and yet these landscapes were so parched, it was kind of unbelievable. But Brad's taken all of that water or what water they do get, and has used it very, very efficiently. He does what's called curb cuts. So instead of the water running just straight down the road, basically what they do is they just cut a section of curb out and put one of these mulched basins in, which is just a concave area at the side of the road with vegetation and mulch in the bottom, and the water flows off the road, soaks that area, and then moves back onto the road as an overflow if it needs to. And he has created an absolute oasis around his place, and then his neighbors got on board, and so his whole block looks like the middle picture, and that's his yard on the right hand side there. So it's inspired. There's art exhibits. The lower left is him standing in one of these beautiful areas in art exhibits. So it's absolutely astonishing what he's managed to accomplish in his own area there. And he does this all with rainwater. They don't irrigate anything. And one of his main principles is spread and infiltrate the flow of water. So many of our residences, basically, the new subdivisions in Calgary, the eavesdrops comes down onto the front driveway and shoots that stuff out to get it off the property as quickly as possible. And that's a completely wasted resource. So the longer that you can have that water meandering around your property, the more that it can soak in and the less that's going to leave your property, which is really what you want. You want to keep all that water to yourself, essentially. So one way of doing that is earthworks, and this is Brad's definition of it. And basically, yeah, you're just creating areas where the water will flow into and will sit for a bit and then infiltrate. You do have to build a lot of these things, and we'll talk about overflows in case you get too much water in them. You want to make sure that it doesn't cause any problems. But earthworks are basically just changing the topography of your yard to allow it to spread and slow that water down.
Hey, I'm just going to jump in with a question here.
Yeah, you bet.
Awesome. Tamara is wondering, does using a garden claw fork or, some kind of garden claw implement still count as tilling the soil? Does that break up soil structure?
It's the turning over of the soil is my understanding of what really breaks it up, which a rototiller does. If you're getting in there and just loosening the soil, that can be okay. But anything that you're turning it over or really disturbing it, it's best to stay away from that type of activity. That makes sense?
Yep, that's all good. Thank you.
All right. So one of the earthworks that you can do in your yard are swales. And swales basically are a ditch on contour. So what you want to do is, this is the way of creating that snaky pattern in your landscape. So you can, and they're level on the bottom. That's what on contour means. And so as water comes into them, and this one is actually from vergepermaculture.ca, is Rob and Michelle Avis teach permaculture courses here in Calgary. This is how they water their garden. And basically what they've done is they've dug a trench and put in that, it's called Big O pipe or weeping tile, some of you may know it as. And that allows them to, their downspouts come directly into this pipe that's snaked throughout their garden. And as that water, as it rains, that water fills up that pipe, and then the holes in the bottom of this pipe just let it slowly infiltrate into their garden. So essentially, they don't have to manually water their garden. So that's an example of passive rainwater harvesting. And what they've done there is they've actually just covered it up with mulch, and that's their pathway. So it's kind of serving double duty there. It's infiltrating water for them, watering their garden, and it's their pathway to get around their garden. So some more example of earthworks. These installations are from a colleague of mine, Jeremy Zoller from Sunshine Earthworks, who does amazing work. So he's put in all of this landscaping infrastructure, and let me grab the laser pointer here. So, and created just this snaky path, and they're going to have a rain tank up here. And so this is the preparatory work. Then here's where he's laid in that pipe and surrounded it by a landscape cloth just to keep it from clogging up, because you don't want any dirt and debris to get into these systems, because then they just don't function quite as efficiently. So he covers it up, neat and tidy. And then basically this one he covered in gravel. And you can see the rain tank there, that's an IBC tote. And it's gathering water off this small roof here. And now that water, as it comes out, is just going to go into that pipe and passively irrigate that whole space there. So if they have enough water in the tank or, falling from the sky, they shouldn't have to do any watering. And here's another example of side garden, same concept. Basically, that's the Big O pipe sitting there. And just gonna put it into the soil with the landscape cloth around it, and then create a lovely path. And this is a sample of one of the IBC totes. Can be sometimes not very attractive, so he's built this beautiful little shed around it, and then you don't have to see the tote, which is sometimes aesthetically more pleasing. And this is just some more examples of ones that he's done. Yeah, just slowing and spreading that water. Anything you can do to slow it down and let it in. And they create such beautiful spaces too. And the plants, I'm assuming this is fairly newly planted, so the plants are fairly small, but it will blossom into a vibrant landscape, I'm sure, in no time. So another thing you can do are called rain gardens. And rain gardens basically are that same mulched basin, and you just select plants. And basically you put your downspout into this mulched basin, and then it passively waters all the plants and allows that water just to soak in, rather than, if you see on the right hand side of that image, the water's simply running off the garage and running into the storm sewer. So if you put rain gardens in, you can redirect that water into a rain garden and allow, you have this beautiful, you know, feature piece in your yard, and it also will infiltrate a lot of your water that's coming off your house. So there was a little video that I'm going to show, and just gives you a really simple outline of how to build a rain garden.
So, you want to build a rain garden? Nice! Rain gardens have a lot of benefits for both you and the environment. They help remove pollutants from stormwater, slow down water flow, and provide habitats for insects and birds. They also help reduce flooding and make your property more attractive. The Rain Garden in a Box how-to guide provides detailed instructions, so check it out if you have questions. Remember to contact Alberta One Call and Dig Shaw to locate and mark all underground utilities before you start digging. So let's get started. First, you'll need to mark out the area of your rain garden based on the plan you've created. If your ground slope is greater than 3%, you'll need to create a berm to contain your amended soil. The berm should be constructed on the downhill side using excavated clay and should be no higher than 20 centimeters. If your property is on relatively level ground, you can start construction by digging down to the selected depth and gently sloping the sides to create a bowl shape. Loosen and break up the soil on the bottom to a depth of 300 millimeters below the base of the excavation to reduce soil compaction and encourage infiltration. Place your amended soil back into the rain garden 200 millimeters at a time and lightly compact it with a weighted lawn roller or by walking on it. The soil should be firm enough that you don't leave deep footprints when you walk on it. Repeat these steps, placing 200 millimeters of amended soil at a time until you reach. You'll need to build an outlet at the lowest point on the downstream side of the rain garden to allow excess water to leave. If you needed to create a berm, the outlet will need to be cut through. You'll need to make sure this outlet doesn't cause water to flow towards any buildings or. Remember, where runoff exits your lot should not change with the addition of this rain garden. In order to protect the soil around the outlet from erosion, line the outlet with drain rock. Now, you'll need to get the water into the rain garden. Lay out and install the overland flow path or downspout extension to direct runoff. If runoff is piped to the rain garden, the bottom of the extension or pipe must be higher than the rain garden to avoid water backing up. Be sure to place drain rock at the end of the extension to help prevent erosion. Now that you've finished the construction stage, you can start planting. Check the how-to guide for inspiration and suggestions. Make sure to choose plants that are tolerant of both drought and moist soil conditions and that are not on the provincial prohibited noxious weed list. Congratulations! You've constructed your first rain garden. If you have any questions regarding the specifics of planning, installation, and maintenance, you can find more detailed instructions in the Rain Garden in a Box how-to guide.
All right, so that was just a simple, description of how you can put a rain garden into your own property. All right. This is probably a good point to stop for questions if there's any.
There was one about what website that was, but they showed it at the end, so we're good to go.
Oh, okay, great, perfect. All right, so now this is the house I used to own in Calgary, and it's just a good model to show you, thoughts about planning a rainwater harvesting system for an urban lot, and then we'll get into the calculations of how to calculate the amount of rainwater you can harvest off your own roof. So this is a standard bungalow, I don't know, 1,000, I can't even remember, 1,500 square feet maybe. And one of the things that we do in permaculture is do a property assessment and call it a sector analysis. So that's why you see a lot of other things on this besides rainwater. And a good thing to note and to do on your property, if you've got a map of your residential property, Google Earth is great for this kind of stuff if you want to get a bit of a layout. And just indicate where the water flows. Just get an idea of how everything is on your property first. So I had a peaked roof, the water flowed to the front. I indicated these are little downspouts that I've indicated here. The water on the back all flowed down to this downspout. And then the garage, of course, like all Calgary garages, outlet into the back alley, which was a complete waste of the resource and also created a skating rink in the winter in the back alley. So that's, if I had the house longer, I certainly would have rehung all of those eaves troughs and had that water directed back into the yard. So the other thing to think about when you're planning your rainwater harvesting system is where you need the water. So I had a little garden. This area here was my small little garden. I had garden along here. I was planning on doing some beds out front. And so just to get an idea in your mind of where you're going to need that water, because you want to collect the rainwater as close to where you're going to use it as possible. And even passively just letting it flow out of the rain barrel if that's at all possible in your design. So I just find that doing this layout and looking at where the water flows on your property, it just gives you a good basis when you're starting to think about your design. So now how to calculate your catchment surface, which for most of us will be our roofs. The formula is, and this is all in meters, so the length of the roof times the width. It's pretty simple. And I referenced findlotsize.com in case you didn't know the size of your house. You can get on there and basically put pointers around the edge of your property and find out the square footage or the square meters of your house. And you can also use Google Earth. That's the other probably more recent thing you could use to do that. All right, so I went into that findlotsize.com and assessed the area of my roof to be about 130 square meters. So that's going to be basically, I want to find what the area of the roof is. That's the first chunk of information I need to do my calculation. And then once I have that, basically you just take the area of the roof times your average rainfall in your area. So for Calgary, it's around 320 millimeters a year. So that calculation, I can collect about 41,000, just over 41,500 liters of water in a year. Now that's an estimate. Of course, there's other factors that we'll get into that's going to affect how much of that you can actually collect. And the table on the right, I just gave you an idea of, so if you know your house is about 2,000 square feet, that gives you an idea of how much water would fall on your property in different rainfall amounts. So in a 2,000 square foot house, an inch of rain is going to give you just over 4,625 liters. So just to give you an idea of the volume of water that you could collect. So any questions on that?
No, you can continue.
Okay. All right. And this is what I was mentioning about the Green Communities Canada program. And these are some suggestions on how to, watch and manage water on your property. And one thing nobody wants to do, but you should go out and do, is go outside when it's raining, because there's all sorts of things you can detect in your rainwater harvesting system that you don't see when it's not raining. You don't see if your eaves troughs are leaking, or the wind's blowing your downspout away from your filter, or there's all sorts of things that you can see when you actually go outside and and watch it in a rain. And you want to make sure all of the ground around your foundation slopes away from the house. You don't want anything that drives water towards your house, because you don't want to have any infiltration within about 10 feet of your foundation, just to protect your house from any water. And when you're doing earthworks and things, that's, again, you don't want to infiltrate that water right close to your house. So just something to keep in mind. Cleaning your eaves troughs, I think we've all heard that one. Make sure there's no gunk in them. And there's also some options for driveways and parking lots that if you need something resurfaced, or if you're building new and you're putting something in, then you can actually choose a permeable paving option. And again, your downspout should be definitely at least 8 meters away from your house, so you're not, again, infiltrating that water close to the house. And if you're wandering around your neighborhood and you happen to notice that the storm drains are all plugged up with leaves or debris or anything, go grab a garbage bag and clean those up, because if they plug up, then it's going to cause flooding problems for somebody. Might not be you, but it might be your neighbor. So it's a public service thing to do. So this is a table from a CMHC guide about what you're allowed to use water for. And some of these things are changing. There's new regulations coming out. There was a new standard that just came out, oh boy, I believe it's been in the last year, for rainwater harvesting. So some of this may have changed a bit. The thing I'd like to point out on this slide is that Australia's been doing this for a very long time, and they use rainwater to do all of this stuff. So I know we have regulations we have to follow in North America. There's a lot of good information that's in Australia that I think we should take more advantage of their experience. Okay, so now we're going to get into the actual components of your rainwater harvesting system. We're going to talk about the catchment surface, conveyance pipe that's moving the water around, prefiltration, and then we'll talk a bit about storage tanks. So your catchment area, most of us are going to have asphalt shingle roofs. That's a pretty standard, well, standard in Calgary. I imagine it's similar in Okotoks. You can use them. You need good filtration. I mean, good filtration will help a lot with the water quality off any type of roof. And metal roofs are, of course, the best, because they don't, they don't shed particles and bits of sand and tar and things that come off of asphalt shingles. And you want to stay away from any wood shingles, because they're most likely treated with a biocide, something that will preserve the shingles, and you don't want that in your rainwater harvesting system. So better to stay away from those. So when we're calculating the amount of rainwater we can harvest, there's also something called a collection efficiency, and there's factors that are going to affect the difference between the amount of water that falls on your property and the amount that you could end up with in your tank. And some of those things are going to be if your roof absorbs any water as it's getting wet. So asphalt shingles will absorb some water in that process. If any water evaporates off of the surfaces, any filtration that you have may take some of that water off and basically discard it and not put it in your tank. We'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. And environmental factors, the systems I've installed here on the farm, I actually need to revise them, redo them a little bit, because my downspout is where it comes out of my eaves troughs into the downspout is too far away from my filter. And if the wind is blowing here, I've literally seen it completely miss the filter because the wind is blowing so hard. So yeah, there's going to be factors that impact the actual amount of water that you can harvest. And then looking at conveyance, this is some great examples of not very well maintained eaves troughs. And as you can imagine, anything coming out of there, you're not going to get very high quality water out of, or any water at all, some of them. So yeah, it's important to keep these things clean and maintained in that way, because the whole goal is to get the cleanest water into your tank possible, and then you don't have as many issues. If you've got gutters full of leaves and debris and that's getting into your tank, then it's obviously going to impact your water quality. So there is commercial gutter guards on the market. I've heard mixed reviews about these. They're quite expensive, and apparently they take quite a while to install. And yeah, I haven't heard really fabulous things about their efficiency except from their advertising brochures. So I've never used them. And actually, this is a good time to talk about a couple Calgary locals. I guess if I'm a little picture up in the corner, these are hard to see, but I'll send you a link to the books that I'm referring to. So Rob and Michelle Avis from Verge Permaculture, who I mentioned earlier, have done an excellent book called Essential Rainwater Harvesting. And they talk about how to get the cleanest water into your tank. And they teamed up with a PhD researcher from Australia who has done an incredible amount of research on rainwater harvesting. That's basically what he's done his whole career. And they have, developed something called a treatment train. And it's too much to get into here. The basic premise is that if you keep everything clean up until your tank, the chances are your water is going to be really good. So part of their thing is that the sun is an amazing. If the sun can actually get to the bottom of your eaves troughs, it can do a lot of that disinfecting work for you. So covering up with gutter guards is, I don't recommend it. I'm sure you'd find lots of other opinions on that one. So one of the most important things, or probably the most important things in your rainwater harvesting system, is some type of filtration. And these are called leaf ears, the one on the left. And basically it's just got a 45-degree screen, and it's going to filter out all of the twigs and the leaves and the cotton fluff and some dust and debris, and it's just going to keep all of that stuff out of your tank. So this is incredibly effective in making sure that the water in the tank that's going into the tank is as clean as it possibly can be. So that I would not recommend any rainwater harvesting system without having some kind of filtration like that. And the picture is one installed. So basically the downspout falls directly into that angled screen, and then the screen just simply lifts out and you can clean it. So I always put these where I can reach them from the ground, and that way, I can just flick it off, and then that way I can keep them maintained all the time, because there's a fair amount of debris that can come out of the eaves troughs. The one on the right is just a different type of filter. All the heavy debris falls through the center, and then the clean water circles around the outside. So it's just a couple of different options as far as filtration, but it's a crucial part of keeping the water in your tank clean. And the filters need to be cleaned. This is my tank at home here, and the filter on the left was, it's got cotton fluff and dust, and we live by a gravel road, so it was dirty, and there's all sorts of pollen, and so it's doing its job. It's keeping all of that stuff out of the tank, but you have to make sure to maintain your filtration systems, otherwise they just stop being effective, and that's going to impact the quality of your water. So another item that you can add in is called a first flush device. And the whole point of this one is it basically diverts an amount of water out of your tank. So rather than that water flowing directly to your tank, it's going to, the vertical tube is going to divert or take up a certain amount of water. It has a ball that floats in that in the tube, and once the vertical tube is full, then that ball seats up into the device, and the remainder of the water flows to the tank. And it's a good thing for, you know, in between rains when there's lots of you know, dust and debris that's accumulated on your roof. It can be nice to divert that water away from your tank, because that'll be, in theory, the dirtiest water that that you'll have in that rainfall, essentially. And Peter Coombs, the PhD from Australia, has done a lot of research on these devices, and he concluded that about 20 liters is the effectiveness of this device. Any larger than that, and you're just wasting a resource, and smaller than that, it's ineffective. So so it's just another item that you can add into your system. And the water out of the column, basically just, there's a slow, there's a screen on the bottom and a slow emitter, a drip emitter on the bottom. So it just slowly drains out over time, and hopefully before the next rain. All right, so any questions about that?
Not yet.
Okay. It's very strange to not see anybody's faces. It's like, I think everybody's still there. They're still signed in. Okay, so now let's talk about storage. Several of you mentioned you have a few rain barrels. That's awesome. And some things to think about when you're getting storage is, I prefer them with a completely sealed lid. That way, nothing can get in there that shouldn't get in there. You know, raccoons, well, maybe not raccoons in Calgary, but, you know, squirrels and mice and kids and things that shouldn't get in tanks. You know, it is a body of water, and you want to make sure that nothing can get in there. Dark in color is good. If you eliminate the organic matter getting into your tank, you shouldn't have problems with algae growth or anything like that. But a dark color, you know, it just prevents any of that from being a problem. Screening over any opening, again, that's the same, like just so nothing gets in there that shouldn't get in there, mosquitoes and all that kind of stuff. And you want to make sure that you're using the water in your rain barrel. So, you know, lots of people fill it up once and then don't use it. So just make sure that that you're using that water constantly. And the other thing in designing your system, you want to make darn sure you plan for the overflow, because I guarantee you your barrels will overflow. My 4,000 liter tanks here on the farm are overflowing. So you want to make sure that overflow is directed away from your property or away from your house and not towards your neighbor's property, and that it's sufficiently sized, because if you think about how much water can come down that downspout, it has to be able to get out of your tank equally as quickly. And then when you're looking at installing them, I mean, even just a rain barrel like the one in the picture, they're 500 pounds when they're full. So you want to make sure that thing's on a solid base that isn't going to tip over, because it can cause damage, it can hurt people. So you just want to make sure that you put it on something nice and solid. And if you want to get into larger tanks, there's all sorts of options. There's almost any shape, size. Budget is generally the limiting factor here for most people. You know, these galvanized tanks, beautiful, quite pricey. These IBC totes basically are pallets for liquid, and they're readily available. I would just caution you to make sure you get one that it's food grade, so it's had food in it, because they ship all sorts of chemicals and oil and all that kind of stuff in these, and you certainly don't want one of those for your rainwater. So if you're going to buy those, just make sure that you check that with them. And then there's some cutesy tanks here, like the ones that just wraps around the corner of your house. Lots of urban lots are going to be limited as far as as space. So some clever tanks like that can be useful. So yeah, that, back to the design. So I basically, like I said, if I'd stayed there long enough, I would have redirected. I did actually end up putting a tank right in this area that I could water, both gardens with. I would have redirected both of these into the yard and out of the alley. And then, I would have put tanks probably on both edges of the house here to water the front yard. So just some things to think about, just, where are you going to use the water? And, probably as much storage as you can afford will be used.
We do have one question quick, Andrea.
Oh, okay.
Rhonda is asking, so if she has a rain barrel, what's the best way to manage the overflow?
So does your rain barrel have an overflow, Rhonda?
We'll see if she chats in about this. I think most of them do that I've seen in the stores.
Right.
So let's assume.
Generally,
yeah,
generally, like the ones from Green Calgary, we sold those kits. So basically, they're just a hose that you hose clamped onto the side of the barrel that had a 10 or 15-foot hose on it, and then you just direct that where you need it and away from your property.
So she's saying
your house. Yeah.
Cool. She's saying yes, it has 2 valves, one on the bottom and one halfway up.
Halfway up. That's interesting.
So I wonder if that one might be.
Your overflow should be at the top, because you want it to overflow when it's full or pretty close to full.
All good.
Okay.
I can, Rhonda, if you want to, you can give me a call anytime. We can chat about it.
All right. So something else to consider is, of course, in the winter, the smaller rain barrels, they're pretty lightweight. And so you want to make sure, they're totally empty, and tuck them away somewhere safe, because with the winds we get in the winter in Calgary, your empty rain barrel can be, way away from your yard if you're not careful. And you certainly don't want to leave any water in it, because the chances are it will freeze and break your rain barrel. So, and then if you have disconnected your downspout or redirected it into your barrel, you want to make sure that you reconnect that downspout, and get the kick pipe that goes out to get the water away from your house, get that restored in the winter. So just to make sure that, in our Chinooks and crazy weather we get here in Alberta, that you're not going to cause any problems after you take your rain barrel out for the winter. And then one of Brad Lancaster's principles: continually reassess your system, the feedback loop. So it's, it's one of those things. Go grab the umbrella, go outside in the rain, watch how things are working, and just make sure, because then you can make adjustments before they cause problems. If, I've put in rain barrels and went, wow, that didn't work. So, you gotta watch and see what's happening, and then, then you can readjust accordingly. So a couple of other resources. ROCCHIO is the US organization for rainwater harvesting, and CMHC had a couple really nice guides, and I did a quick search, and they weren't listed anymore, so I apologize, that slide's a little outdated. So so some resources, and I can send you the links to the other books I referenced, or I'll send them to Ginny and she can forward them on to you.
I can probably post them on the event webpage, because we'll be posting this video on there as well in the next few days. So if you send me links, I can post them on that page for everyone to access.
Okay, great. All right, and then one other thing that we should talk about: Okotoks has some great rebates. That's very progressive. There's not a whole lot of communities that are doing rebates for rainwater harvesting. So I'm just going to pull this over, and then I'm going to let Ginny talk about the rebate programs that Okotoks has.
Sure, and yeah, you can leave your thank you page on there. It looks better than anything else.
Oh,
Oh, wait, you were going to put on the website, weren't you? That's totally
I
cool too.
did.
Oh, we're still seeing
Can
your
you see the website?
PowerPoint.
Okay, hang on.
But
Let
that's
me,
okay. I can talk while you figure it out. So yeah, the town of
there you go.
Okotoks, we do offer rebates for rainwater harvesting systems. So I'll just read you our little blurb that we have in our pamphlet. So we offer rebates for systems that include larger residential scale tank systems or cisterns that collect a minimum of 4,546, we're very exact, liters, which equals 1,000 gallons of rainwater. So we cover collection system expenses such as the piping, debris traps, filters, pumps, and installation costs. And so what we offer for this rebate is $1,000. Or 50% of the cost of your project, up to $1,000. Yeah, so that's a fun thing. If I know a lot of people that have done it in the past, I think their systems have cost maybe around $2,000 if they've done it themselves. So you can get some pretty cool stuff installed in your yard if you really want to. And then what Andrea has up there is our other, we have a lot of other rebate items. And I know I've seen a lot of your names in my, as I'm processing rebate applications. So I know a lot of you that are listening today have actually taken part in our program, which is awesome. So yeah, we'd like to promote, water conservation in your yards. We offer rebates on rain barrels as well. So we do $50 for those. We've got mulch, both rock and organic mulch is available for the rebate. We have a drought tolerant plant list, which is a great list of different plants that are good for this region. They are also deer resistant, though we got to keep in mind deer eat anything when they're hungry. But most of those plants are pretty good for that. You shouldn't need to water them after they've been established. Drought tolerant ground cover is another thing. So grass seed that isn't Kentucky bluegrass is a good option. A lot of nurseries these days have great turf for that too. So there's good options out these days, I gotta say. We do have lots of good advantages for saving water in our yards. So feel free, yeah, that's our lovely webpage there. It's just okotoks.ca/water rebate, and all the fun details are on there. And if you have any questions, my phone number is on there. You can chat with me anytime. I love talking about that program because it's so great. We love to see people saving water.
Absolutely, and it's not a super common thing for municipalities to offer those kind of rebates. So you guys are lucky in Okotoks.
It's true. I love our administration here. They've gotten some good programs over the years. Oh, and you know what I forgot to talk about, and it's probably like the funnest thing about our rebate program, is we're actually offering rebates on landscaping. So if you want to xeriscape your front yard or your backyard, we've got a minimum square meterage of about 46 square meters that you need to do, unless you're doing your entire front yard or something. But we're offering people $3,000 to do that kind of landscaping. That's a pretty good deal. So that money would cover the cost of your plants and your mulch. And if you needed to import any soil or compost or anything like that, it would cover those costs only. So it doesn't cover, if you get a landscape company to do it, doesn't cover delivery or what do you call that when people are working really hard? I can't think tonight. Anyways, labor, that's it. It doesn't cover labor. But it's a really great deal if you want to do your yard and do some low maintenance, water-wise landscaping. We would love to support you in that. So yeah, keep the applications coming, everyone. Is there anything else you wanted to say, Andrea?
Is there how much money has Okotoks set aside for that in total?
This year is the first year we've had $90,000 set aside. So it's a big year. Usually I know, it's awesome. Wow. Usually we have 40 and it usually sells out by the end of the year, which is awesome. But this year our water services team set aside just a little bit more to try to encourage the landscaping. So I'm really putting that extra $50,000 trying to encourage people to do the landscaping portion. So
perfect. Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, it's great.
All right, so yeah, that's the end of my presentation there.
All right. Well, then I guess I will wrap things up with everyone. Feel free to stay online if you like for a few minutes. So thanks
Yep.
again, everyone, for joining us this evening. This was really fun. I learned so much. Again, this is great. And thank you so much, Andrea, for this such a good presentation. So if anyone thinks of any questions after we log off the webinar, please email them to me at sustainability@okotoks.ca, and we will get you an answer within a few days' time. No problem there. Also, this is being recorded, so if you want to rewatch this presentation or recommend it to a friend, a recording will be posted to today's event page within a few days' time. Usually our people are great and they get it up. It'll probably be here by like noon tomorrow is what I'm going to assume, but I won't put pressure on my lovely girl who converts my videos and posts them online. So before you all go, I just also want to let you know about upcoming environmental events. There's just a couple. So next Wednesday, I'll be hosting 2 webinars along with NMAX actually, and with the Foothills Immigration Society. So we're hosting 2 webinars for newcomers, specifically immigrants, but really to anybody. The first one is at 9 a.m. and it is all about energy use, energy bills, how to read them and understand what you're paying for, energy conservation. And the second session is at 7 p.m. and that's with me, and it's all about waste services, water services. So we're going to cover topics such as how to read your utility bill, tips and tricks for saving money on your bills, and best ways to conserve energy and water in your home. So if you know anybody that this would be of interest to, details are online at okotoks.ca/environmental events. And next month's Green Living Workshop in July is about how we can all of the veggies that everybody's been growing this summer while they've been staying and working at home. So it's on July 11th at 2 p.m. And again, the details are online. So big thanks again to Andrea for this wonderful presentation today. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending. So stay safe, stay healthy, and take care. And it's pouring rain out there. So if you don't have a rain barrel, go and grab one. And I will let you all know who has won the rain barrel by tomorrow. Cheers and good night.
Good night.